Okay, so we've been learning how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. And when we were learning how to factor, occasionally we saw a polynomial that was prime, meaning it wouldn't factor. Well, how do you solve a quadratic equation if your polynomial won't factor? There's another way, and there is a formula that you can use. It's called the quadratic formula, and this will work on any quadratic equation out there. Any quadratic equation. Whether it factors or whether it doesn't, this will work. Okay, so let's go over this new formula, and you can see it over here, and I'll walk you through this formula here in just a second. First of all, you got to make sure the equation is equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, then we know how to fix that. We've been working on that for the last few weeks. And make sure it's in standard form. Remember, the biggest exponent first, then the next biggest, and then your constant last. Okay? So once it's in standard form, the number that's in front of x squared, which in this case would be 1, that's your a number. So I'm going to write the standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is the number in front of x squared, and b is your number in front of x, and c is your constant. They go in order, a, b, c, once it's in standard form. So in this problem here, I need to identify a, b, and c. So a is going to equal the number in front of x squared, which is 1. b is equal to the number in front of x, which would be -5. And c is equal to my constant, -36. Okay. Now that I've identified them, now I'm going to throw these into this formula. So I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to write it the same way, but I'm going to, so you can hear the verbal explanation of it. It's x equals, so we're going to solve for x. Read this as the opposite of b. Don't read it as negative b. Read it as, think in your head, the opposite of b. So the opposite of b, plus or minus, we've seen that plus or minus before, and then this big square root. Okay, and underneath the square root, we're going to have b to the second power, b squared, minus 4 times a times c. Three things being multiplied together here. -4 times a times c, all over a big fraction, 2 times a. Now, I know that this looks rather daunting. However, this is simply a problem where we have to plug in these values and let your calculator do the work. So it's a calculator problem. So you know when we're factoring, we have to come up with numbers. We have to remember the different methods. With the quadratic formula, you don't have to remember any of that. You just have to know the formula and how to plug these numbers in and come up with your answer. And just simplify until you come up with your answer. The calculator will eventually spit out your answer. Okay, so I'm going to take these three values and I'm going to plug it into the formula. So x equals the opposite of b. Well, b is -5, so now I'm going to use +5. Plus or minus this big square root. All I'm doing is taking these values and I'm replacing the variables with those values. B to the second, so -5 to the second, minus 4 times my a number, which is 1, times my c number, which is -36, all over 2 times my a number, which is 1. And now all I've done is I've just plugged the numbers in. The opposite of b, plus or minus, b to b squared, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. And now I'm going to simplify. And before you do anything, well, your next step is going to be simplify everything that's under that radical. And you have to follow the rules of PEMDAS, remember? So this becomes, I'm just going to keep this 5 plus or minus for right now. So 5 plus or minus -5 to the second power is -5 times -5, which is 25. Then I'm going to multiply. So I want you to notice, I'm not going to put this minus sign over here. I'm going to use it when I multiply all three of these numbers. So I'm going to multiply -4 times 1 times -36. And if I get a positive answer, I'm going to write a plus sign here. And if I get a negative number, I'm going to write a minus sign here. So -4 times 1 is -4 And negative 4 times negative 36 is going to give me a positive number. That's going to give me 144. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 36 is positive 144. All over 2 times 1 is 2. So it's starting to get cleaned up now. I need to bring this radical all the way down to one single number. So I'm just going to add these two together. So this becomes 5 plus or minus 25 plus 144 is 169 all over 2. Now I have everything underneath the radical simplified down to one number, and now I'm ready to take the square root of this number. So the square root of 169, if you punch it in your calculator, is 13. So now this problem is going to replace this with 13. Not square root of 13, just 13. So it becomes 5 plus or minus 13 all over 2. Okay, so here's where the plus or minus comes in. Notice I've just been carrying that plus or minus along. So plus or minus, plus or minus, plus or minus, same here. Here's where it comes into play. Now you're going to create your two solutions. Remember, it's quadratic, so it can have two solutions. One of the solutions will be this right here if you worked it with the plus sign. So 5 plus 13 divided by 2. And the other one will be if you work this with the minus sign. So 5 minus 13 over 2. That's what the plus or minus means. 5 plus 13 over 2 and 5 minus 13 over 2. And when you simplify both of these, this is going to give you both of your solutions. So 5 plus 13 is 18 over 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9. There's one of my solutions. 5 minus 13 is negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. There's my other solution. 9 and negative 4. Quadratic formula. So let's just try one more here. So notice this one doesn't equal 0, so I need to make it equal 0. So I'm going to subtract 6x. So I'm left with, well, I can subtract 6x from its like term here. It does have a like term. So I get x squared. 15 minus 6 is 9x equals 0. In this problem, there is no c value. So c is going to be 0. Your a number, identify a, b, and c first, right? A, b, and c. Your a number is the number in front of x squared, which is 1. Your b number is the number in front of 9. And your c value for this, and since there isn't a constant here, it's 0. And now I'm going to throw these numbers into the formula. So x equals the opposite of b, 9, plus or minus the square root of b to the second, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times your a number. So you got to memorize the formula. And then you just let your calculator do the work. So this is 9, just carry along the plus or minus, 9 plus or minus the square root. 9 squared is 81. Minus 4 times 1, negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times 0 is 0. So that's just 81 because it's 81 minus 0 over 2. So you have 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 minus 0 is just 81 over 2. Now I'm ready to take the square root. So this is 9 plus or minus again. The square root of 81 is 9 over 2. Now that you have everything simplified, this is where you work it twice. You work it as 9 plus 9 over 2, and you work it as 9 minus 9 over 2. Well, this is 9 plus 9 is 18 over 2, which would give you 9. This would be 9 minus 9 is 0 over 2, which would give you 0. So there's your two solutions. Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay, so let's look at some special cases here. If you look at this problem, it's quadratic, but it doesn't equal 0. So I need to make it equal 0. So I'm going to minus x, and I have an x over here I can minus that from. So I'm left with x squared plus 6x equals negative 10. Still not equal to 0. I'm going to add 10 to both sides. Remember, it's got to equal 0. So x squared plus 6x plus 10 equals 0. And now I'm ready to use the formula. Okay. So x equals the opposite of, hang on a second. Let me identify A, B, and C. A is 1, B is 6, and C is 10. Now, x equals the opposite of B, the square root of B to the second, minus 4 times your A number times your C number, all over 2 times your A number. So I'm just plugging it into the formula, and now I'm going to simplify this. Negative 6 plus or minus 6 to the second is 36. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 10 is negative 40. 2 times 1 is 2. So now I have negative 6 plus or minus the square root. 36 minus 40 is negative 4 over 2. Okay, here's why this is a special case. You can't take the square root of a negative number. It's not negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. So for this problem, guess what? There is no solution. Okay? If you get a negative number underneath the radical, then there's no solution. Okay. Last problem. Let's look at 10. A is already equals 0, so we're good there. A equals negative 1, B equals negative 2, and C equals 7. So x equals the opposite of B, so now I'm going to use a positive 2, plus or minus the square root of B to the second, negative 2 squared, minus 4, my A number is negative 1, times my C number, which is 7, all over 2 times my A number, which is negative 1. Okay, I'm going to simplify. X equals 2 plus or minus. Just bring the plus or minus along. Negative 2 to the second is 4. Negative 4 times negative 1 is 4. And 4 times 7 is positive 28. So I'm going to write that as a plus 28. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. 4 plus 28 is 32 over negative 2. Okay. Now I can't take the square root of 32. So I'm going to simplify the radical. And this is going to be in a lesson we're going to learn before we take the FSA test. But follow along just for a second. 32 is the same as 4 times 8. Here's why I want to rewrite this as 4 and 8. Because the square root of 4 is 2. So instead of the square root of 4 times the square root of 8, this becomes 2 times the square root of 8, all over negative 2. And now I can reduce this. These are both all divisible by 2. Not the radical. I can't divide the radical by a number because it's inside the radical. But I can divide these. So 2 divided by negative 2 is negative 1. And then plus or minus 1 radical 8. Or square root of 8. So negative 1 plus or minus. These 2's cancel. These 2's cancel. And that's my answer. And we'll try to not make it any harder than that right there.